Hey class, this is module 12 covering the topic of adolescence, and it's a pretty short module. The first topic we're going to talk about is adolescent egocentrism, which is not in your textbook, but it is a topic that you'll have to know for the exam. So let's jump right into that topic. Compared to little kids, adolescents are far superior, as are adults, in their ability to think logically and abstractly about all kinds of things. Conceptual things and solving problems and things of that nature. But for adolescents, they don't always apply the same kind of logical thinking to their own personal lives. And one of the unique things about adolescents is that they tend to be a little egocentric, and that is a little self-absorbed. And because of that, it ties into three types of adolescent egocentric thinking. And these are kind of patterns of thinking that are more common in adolescence. Sometimes these thoughts can be a little irrational. So one of them is called the imaginary audience, which is the tendency for adolescents to feel like they're kind of on stage, like everyone's watching them and everyone's paying attention to them. And so if you consider maybe a time in junior high or high school where you were getting ready for school and maybe your hair wasn't situated just right, and in your mind you kind of imagined a lot of people would notice your hair being out of place or maybe even making comments to you. And in reality, you can think back and probably recognize that was kind of silly. You kind of had that audience blown out of proportion in your mind a little bit, and most people probably wouldn't notice if your hair was a little bit out of place because most people aren't keeping track of exactly how your hair lays on your head and all that stuff, right? So sometimes that can make adolescents really critical of their appearance and things like that. It could also work the other way, though. If an adolescent thinks they look pretty hot one day before they go to school, they might imagine everyone admiring their new outfit or something, and everyone paying attention to them. Either way, though, the adolescent kind of blows out of proportion in his mind how many people are paying attention to him and noticing him. And that's why it's called the imaginary audience, because he's imagining an audience of people kind of monitoring his behavior and judging him either in positive or negative ways, however he thinks they would judge him. The other one is called the personal fable, which has to do with adolescents' sense or feeling that they're unique in some way compared to most other people. And this can play out in a lot of different ways. This could be where they feel like an event has affected them in a way that no one would understand, or they're dealing with stress. Nobody understands how much stress they're under. They might also think like they're better than most other people in certain skills. In fact, I'm pretty sure a lot of high school athletes, especially boys, could kind of imagine themselves possibly playing professional sports one day. And the reality of that is really silly because, quite honestly, statistically, this is true, statistically speaking, less than 1% of high school athletes will ever play professional at a professional level. So for an adolescent to think that could be a pretty decent possibility for them is kind of irrational. But it's part of that personal fable, the sense that they're unique or special in some way. The last one is called the illusion of invulnerability, and it's the belief that sometimes adolescents feel like they're invulnerable, like they're invincible. And they know bad things happen to other people, but they can't imagine those same bad things happening to them. So the illusion of invulnerability can actually lead to risk-taking behaviors, like maybe experimenting with drugs, drinking and driving, texting and driving. And part of the illusion of invulnerability, sometimes it comes from the personal fable. So let's say you have an adolescent whose personal fable is that he thinks he's an awesome driver, better than most other people. Well, because of that personal fable, that might lead him to think that he would never get into an accident, which would be his illusion of invulnerability. And then he starts driving a little more recklessly and dangerously because of his personal fable that that he's a great driver. So those two can tie together sometimes in that way. So I'm going to show you a short clip. This is a campaign ad for texting and driving, and I think this is a good application for egocentric thinking.
So I just confess that I text and drive. If I get a text, I'll look at my phone.
It's definitely texting.
Instagram, Twitter, Facebook.
Snapchat. I do Snapchat and drive sometimes.
Is that like making Snapchats or watching them?
Making them.
A, texting is like my main form of communication.
Boredom, honestly.
And B, well, no, I guess no, it's really just A.
I've only never done it at stoplights. I've always been really good about it.
The passenger has a pretty important role driving now, where they're like, oh, red light, red light.
If someone that you like texts you, you're like, you can't just like let it sit there without just knowing what they said.
Because what if something exciting's happening or something happened?
Like, every time I do it, I think about it, I'm like, why am I doing this? And then I just keep doing it.
So I'd like to, want to introduce you to a friend of ours.
My name is JC.
Hi, Alexis.
Hi, Dash.
Justin, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. I just really quickly want to have a chat, tell you what happened to me. When I was 21 years old, driving home from my college graduation ceremony, driver on his phone was so distracted, he turned left into the intersection at a red light. Another car, an 18-wheeler, swerved to miss him and hit my family's car. And the resulting collision actually killed both of my parents. I spent 2 months in the hospital fighting for my own life, and then 2 more months in a rehab hospital, learning how to walk again, learning how to speak again, learning how to dress myself and how to feed myself. I live with a partially paralyzed body. I didn't have my daddy to walk me down the aisle when I got married.
Having sort of met JC, because you look at JC and sort of give those same reasons.
Usually I use my phone to change a song on. I try to use it as little as possible, but
I'm not gonna look at my phone ever again.
Honestly, if I have been sitting at a red light, I'll glance down to see if my mom's texting me, but the people's lives that are impacted from something that is so stupid.
I can assure you on my drive home right now, I'm not going to use my phone and drive, and I'm not going to do it when I go to work tomorrow and the next day after that until, it becomes a habit, and that just doesn't happen at all.
I know this is hard, I'm sorry, it's hard for me too, but this is real. You have the power to really actually make a difference and do something about it.
Thank you.
So that's a sobering reality oftentimes is the consequence of this type of thinking is that sometimes, particularly with the personal fable combined with the illusion of invulnerability, is consequences can be very tragic, of course. So I try to think of why that kind of behavior would be more common among adolescents and how it relates to this type of thinking. And maybe we could apply this to the imaginary audience, particularly if there are other people around or other friends in the car. Maybe they know you're getting text messages and such, or they're sending messages and Snapchats and whatnot, and maybe you feel like they're going to judge you harshly if you don't do that, or they're going to think you're kind of a goody two-shoes if you're not checking your phone or something. So maybe you feel like they're going to judge you that way, when in fact, in reality, they might not be judging you that way at all. They might actually think you're pretty smart for not doing that, but because of the imaginary audience, you might make assumptions about how they're thinking about you, and maybe that would make the person decide to use his phone while driving. Maybe as part of it's a personal fable. I think a lot of adolescents think that they're pretty good at texting and driving, maybe better than most people. Maybe they think they're more skilled in that. And maybe they think, well, if I ever have a close call, then I'll stop. But until then, I must be pretty good because I haven't gotten an accident yet. And then part of that is the illusion of invulnerability. Look, every teen these days has been told about the dangers of texting and driving, just like they have been told about the dangers of drinking and driving. Everyone probably knows somebody who's been in an accident because of they were distracted while they were driving. Unfortunately, sometimes we even go to school with kids who die in accidents because of things like that. Yet somehow we can't picture ourselves falling victim to the same thing or the same kinds of consequences. So maybe part of that is the illusion of invulnerability, and they feel because of their personal fable that they're a good driver, or they're good at texting and driving, or they're good at multitasking, that these kinds of bad things just wouldn't happen to them. And of course, it's all pretty irrational because they know what happens to other people, just don't think it's going to happen to them. Another thing, important challenge for adolescents is to develop an identity. And when we talked about Carl Rogers' theory and the real self and the ideal self, part of that is based on is kind of based on this idea that you kind of know what you stand for and who you are as a person and what you value and what your goals are and your aspirations, and you kind of just follow that path and you don't let people pull you away from that. And that's all good, but I think that can be especially challenging for younger kids, teenagers, even young adults, because particularly in adolescence, we're still kind of working on our identity. You know, we've grown up in an environment where a lot of our identity is based on what our parents' identities are. You know, you grow up being Republican, maybe if your parents are Republican. You grow up being a Cub fan if your parents were Cub fans. You grow up with certain religious beliefs based on the way your parents raised you. But then it's true for a lot of adolescents as they get a little more freedom and meet more people and experience more diverse opinions, sometimes through their peers at school, sometimes through the internet. But all of that is really common, and adolescents start to consider, you know, hey, is that really me? Am I really Republican? Because you never, in my house, talk much about Democrats. And then maybe, you know, you start meeting people that are Democrats and you learn more about them and you start thinking, oh, you know, maybe they have some good ideas too. And the point is that there's a point during adolescence where we're trying to establish a sense of identity. You might even notice you try out different identities. You might act differently in different environments. You might hang out with the jocks at school one day and then kind of get along with them okay, and then you kind of meet some kids in band and you're kind of hanging out with some of the band guys, and you maybe even change your style of dress once in a while. You go through little phases where you have different fashions and hairstyles and stuff like that. And a lot of that just has to do with trying on different roles, different identities. And fortunately, you know, by the time you reach adulthood, our identities are a little bit more well established, but they can still evolve over time. That's no doubt about that. But adolescence is definitely that period where we're really trying out our identities and trying to figure out who we are and what we stand for. And a lot of our identity does involve our social identities and what kind of groups we affiliate with. That's an important part of our identity. So there's several researchers, one in particular named in the book, Eric Erickson, who's done a lot of work on identity development and some other things related to that. But there's a fair amount of evidence to support the idea that once you have developed a pretty decent identity, a pretty sound feeling for who you are and you know what you stand for and what you want to do with your life, it allows you to be more open to close relationships. And I think that's kind of goes along well with Carl Rogers' theory as well, that you know, once you kind of understand who you are and are okay with that, you know, okay, this is who I am and this is what I stand for, then you're not as easily pulled away from that by other people. And I think once you feel good about yourself and develop a healthy self-concept, with that comes higher self-esteem, higher confidence, and more comfort. You become more comfortable just being you. And I can see why the research shows that that ties into a capacity for building closer relationships, because now you can just be yourself, and you don't worry so much about being judged by other people and such. The last thing in this chapter, in this module, which is pretty short, is the topic of emerging adulthood. And this is really another challenge for adolescents. Honestly, if you consider, 60 years ago, 70 years ago, I think of like when my grandfather was young, a lot of people back in the old days, a lot of them didn't even finish elementary school. My grandpa went to school and graduated from 8th grade, and then that was it. And that was true many years ago, even if you finished high school. But then, like, you got a job. There were factory jobs. There were, you could learn a trade. Like my grandpa learned how to be a bricklayer and did construction and brickwork. And kind of like right out of high school, he was a man. Got married, started a family. They bought a little house. He was like an adult right out of high school. And things are just a lot different now, because more students are going to high school, more students are going to college. It's not as easy to be financially independent when you're right out of high school like it was years ago, where you could just, get a good factory job and, make a go of it. So part of that too is, adolescents are still working on an identity. I think it takes a little longer now than it did in the past, because we're in school a lot and still kind of exploring careers, spending more time exploring careers and what you want to do with your life and all that stuff. And that's all an important part of your identity. So what we say now is that the ladder from adolescence to adulthood is lengthened considerably over the past decades, and that's what emerging adulthood is all about. I remember when I finished my master's degree, up to that point I had worked all through college because I had to pay my way through college, but the jobs I had to take were depending on hours that were flexible around my class schedule, so I really didn't have a career. I just worked a lot of part-time jobs to try to make ends meet and working as many hours as I could whenever I could. And when I finished graduate school, because I had taken a year off at one point, by then I think I was 25 years old. And I had to move back home with my mom because I couldn't afford my own place. I didn't have a steady job. And so that's kind of the idea here. And as not fully independent yet, and that's pretty true for a lot of people into early adulthood, where a lot of people still have to rely on their parents and others for a sense of independence or to make ends meet, whether it's financial or otherwise. Sometimes we even lean on our parents quite a bit for emotional support into our 20s. So it's a little bit harder. I think that's part of the whole theme of identity development and having a sense of independence. But certainly graduating from college, as you will all do someday, definitely helps once you become financially independent. I think that's a big part of it, is getting your own place and And that's a pretty cool feeling when you get out on your own, as I know some of you are, but kind of get on your own and have those adult responsibilities and bills and things to pay on your own. It's a pretty cool feeling. Even though you spend a lot of money, it's neat to feel like an adult. So, all right, that kind of wraps this up. It's a pretty short module, and the next module will tie in pretty well with identity development, because one of the topics is gender and sexuality, and that, of course, is an important part of your identity, and that's something that a lot of people struggle with. Pretty hot topic, particularly gender identity in the last couple of years in the United States has been a really highly debated topic in some parts of the U.S. So